Students, are you aware of any of the major modern figure who kind of pioneered the field of psychology? This is my question to you. Are you aware of any?
Sigmund Freud.
Okay, very good, Shazib Hassan. Yes, this is Sigmund Freud. Other students and anybody who could just maybe raise hand or let me know, are you aware of this name, Sigmund Freud? Should I assume you are not aware of it?
Sir, I heard this name.
Okay, good. All right. Any other student? So tell me how many of you are in the class? I mean, the full strength of the class. What is the full strength of the class? Approximate. Like it is 8 or 10 or it is 20 or 25?
Sir, I think 20 or 25.
Oh, really? Is it that big class? Oh, okay. Because for theory class, I was assuming it could be maybe 10. Okay, very big class. So we have 14 right now, I think 13 or 14. Anyways, okay. So two of you confirmed that you know this figure whose name is Sigmund Freud. Let me put this name in the chat box too, just to make sure that you are getting it right the way I'm saying it. All right. So rest of you, if you could have looked at the chat box and see the name. Anybody else who is aware of Sigmund Freud? Okay. So don't look up internet yet, okay? If I want you to do that, you can do that. There is nothing right or wrong in the questions that I'm asking you, okay? Just out of your own memory. Anybody who's aware of any of the works written by Sigmund Freud, any of the books, any of the essays? It's fine if you don't know, but I am just trying to, get a sense of to what extent you have been exposed to this kind of literature in the past.
Sir, I guess his famous book is The Interpretation of Dream.
Very good. Yeah. So,
So he was the one who introduced the concept of id, ego.
very good. Excellent. Yeah.
Sir, I think
So,
that he's associated with sociology.
socialism.
Sociology.
Oh, say it again.
Sociology. I heard his name in my sociology
Oh, okay. It's
class.
possible. It's possible. Yeah. It's possible. Right. So, so Snan asks if it is the person who talks about stream of consciousness. I don't think so. I mean, not directly. That is somebody else, right? That is an American psychologist. That is a different
Uh,
person.
Sir,
Anyways,
I don't
yes,
know. I think Sigmund Freud has worked on politics, like he's a leftist as well, or maybe a progressive.
that is not what he's famous for. He's famous for some other concepts, right? So if we collect these responses by Shazib and Mansoor and then Arif, uh, so basically one very factual response that he wrote a book called Interpretations of Dreams. Okay, he wrote it
Sir,
in 1900, I think, and then the other one, the other response that he talked about, I think Abir was saying about that. Uh,
uh, s-
he's famous for,
sir, in which
hold on,
he
for, he's famous for the concept of id, ego, and superego. Okay, so these are two important responses we just got. So Abir, continue now.
yes, sir. In which he mentioned that dreams is a kind of expression of unconscious desires.
Okay, very good. right? Yes, yes, that is what he says, in most of his works, that our dreams are not relevant, right? Rather, they manifest such as reality, and that reality is the core of consciousness. All right. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Good. Yeah. Okay. Now, one book that we just got to know from Shazi, which is interpretations of dream. There are other, famous books by the same author. Uh, so, for example, The Player Principle is another book by Sigmund Freud, which is equally important. Another book which, in fact, you might find really interesting to read. I mean, even if you are not trained into psychology, still you can read it. It is called The Discontents of Civilization. I can put it over here. The Discontents of Civilization. Now, but for our purposes, more important work by Sigmund Freud is Interpretations of Dream and the Player Principle. So, as Abir put it, that Freud has a very special view of dreams, and according to him, dreams are the manifestation of certain desires, right? But there is something which is more basic to what he says about dreams and desires. Uh, so the basic idea that we do get from Sigmund Freud is that that desires, human desires, they are manifestation of motives, motives that we have, intentions, right? And motives or intentions, they have force of life, or they are force of life, right? So human life kind of is recognized by the presence of desire or the presence of motive. So in fact, all the actions in human life and all the thoughts in human life and all the emotions, human life, they are kind of symptomatic of, a living being, right? And now this view is a little different from the other views that we have about life. For example, some of the scientists would believe that it is the, you know, uh, it is the blood circulation, it is the breathing, right? It is certain composition of human body which is symptom of life, right? We don't the, People like Sigmund Freud, they don't deny that, but they add to that by saying that human desires and motives and emotions, they have equal presence in human life, and they should be understood and they should be analyzed in order to, better explain how human life works. So sometimes certain human actions which are, totally ununderstandable, but they could actually be directed by something which is in human unconsciousness, right? We are not aware of that because we cannot see human unconsciousness. But if we talk to those people who commit those certain kinds of actions, we get to know that there was uh, an unconscious motive for that particular action, right? So the action that I'm the word action that I'm using over and over again, by that we mean any, performed activity, right? That performed activity could be good, it could be bad. Okay, we are not being judgmental about that, but it could be any kind of activity. For example, if somebody acts in a very unusual manner at public place, right? Somebody is always shy of social places or public places. On the other hand, somebody has fear of heights, right? Or it could be a simple activity of, all the time scribbling on the paper. Okay? Or it could be another, permanent habit which cannot be explained or rationalized, right? Uh, so, so there is no, there, there is no exclusivity of the activities. All kinds of activities or all kind of human action, which is observable, right? Which is observable by other people. All those actions, they are motivated by, or they are compelled by what we call human unconsciousness, right? But that is not how everybody would observe these external phenomena. The people who observe the external phenomenon, which is human action, the people who observe these human actions as motivated by unconsciousness, those people are called psychologists, right? And based upon this observation that human action is directed by unconsciousness, uh, this understanding of human self results in a particular viewing of things. So you start viewing at the things from a certain perspective if you believe that human actions are directed by unconsciousness. Now, if, for example, you are a reader of a book, say that book is a novel. As you read the book, a novel, you come across quite a number of characters in the book, in the novel. Is that right? Are you with me? Is that what happens?
Yes,
I
sir.
hope all of you
Yes,
have read
sir.
a novel or the other, right?
Yes, sir.
Right. So when you come across those characters in a particular book, in a novel or a short story, there could be many ways to explain away the actions of all those characters, right? But if you explain or understand or analyze the actions of those characters, not on their face value, but as directed by unconsciousness, then you are essentially looking at that character from psychoanalytical perspective, right? So psychoanalysis criticism or psychoanalytical criticism precisely is a kind of criticism which allows you to analyze a character in a particular novel from the point of view of psychology of that particular character, right? And by looking at the psychology of that particular character, we mean that you study the psyche behind all the actions. By the way, the word psyche means soul, right? That is where this word comes from. The word psyche means soul, right? But Sigmund Freud does not believe in any kind of soul, right? Rather, by psyche, he meant the unconsciousness, right? So when you study the actions of the character or behavior of the character or the expression of the character, when you study that in order to understand what is the unconscious motive behind all those actions, then you are doing psychoanalytical criticism. Okay, so why did I name Sigmund Freud? Because Sigmund Freud is said to be the father of modern psychology, right? That is why when we understand or when we try to understand what is psychoanalytical criticism, we have to first understand some of the major tenets of what we call Freudian psychology or psychology of Sigmund Freud, right? So that is where it begins from. The idea begins from there. That is why you need to be aware of that. So, Sigmund Freud's own book, The Interpretations of Dream, which Shahzeb referred to, in fact, is an elaboration of this viewpoint that human actions are directed by unconsciousness, right? The question is then, what is the book about? Now, the book is a compilation of a number of dreams which were seen by certain individuals whom Sigmund Freud interviewed over the course of his life. So Sigmund Freud uh, was a psychologist. He was a doctor, to be exact, right? But then, as a doctor, he came up with this weird view. It was weird at that time when he started saying that many of the diseases or many of the abnormalities which he could observe in his patients, those abnormalities were not caused by any physical disease. Rather, those abnormalities were caused by some psychological unbalance. And people were surprised to hear this kind of theory. Nobody believed in that for a long time. But then he uh, carried out quite a number of treatments of the patients, and he kind of helped them recover the kind of abnormality or anomaly or the kind of disease that they were suffering from. So there are two major examples of that. One was that he met and interviewed and treated uh, many individuals who returned from World War One. Okay, so they had various phobias, various fevers. They had abnormality in their behavior, which everybody assigned to something bad which was happening to their brain. But Sigmund Freud said, no, it was not the brain, it was the mind. Okay, so brain is a physical bodily organ, right? But mind is something else. Freud was one of those first modern people who introduced this concept of mind. Okay, so as Abir used the word id consciousness or unconsciousness, in fact, id consciousness and inconsciousness, these are three phases of human mind, right? Or these are three phases of human thinking process. These people who returned from wars, they were, kind of a group of people uh, whom Sigmund Freud interviewed over the course of his career. And the second group of people were, in fact, the women, who were suffering from various kind of anxieties, right? The domestic women, and then he interviewed them. In fact, those women came up uh, with this abnormality, which Sigmund Freud described as hysteria, right? But that hysteria was for a long time attributed to some external outside, uh, you know, supernatural beings. There were this belief in Europe for a long time that there were some evil souls, or there were some evil beings which actually caused that kind of abnormality in women. But then Freud came up with this idea that, well, that is not the case. In fact, the kind of domestic oppression which these women have to suffer, it is because of that domestic oppression that these women start having historical, hysterical personality, and they start getting those fits and all those all those abnormal behaviors. So this was the second group of people he met, and he interviewed them. So when he met these two group of people, I mean, there were other as well, but broadly speaking, this is how you can classify these groups of people that he met. So when he met them, by meeting, I mean, they visited him as patients, but then he interviewed them in detail. So he listened to what they said. Now, most of all these people, when they met him, they narrated the dreams that they had. He was very much interested in knowing what kind of dreams these people were getting. And to his surprise, at that time in 1900, to his surprise, all those people who had this kind of, unusual behavior or a little abnormal behavior, all those people had equally abnormal or scary dreams. Okay, so he listened to those dreams. He recorded them very carefully. He wrote them down. And then he provided consultation and advice to those people based upon those dreams. Along with that, he continued to write whatever advice he provided to them. Right? So he kind of interpreted those dreams as well. He wrote detailed interpretation of all those dreams. And that book, the whole of it, we today know as Interpretation of Dream. So it is a huge encyclopedic book where he has offered interpretation of the dreams of those people who met him and who had some kind of psychological disorder. He listened to their dreams and then he analyzed them. The idea behind was precisely this. Okay, so using these words, id, ego, and superego. So he was, of the view that that id is the deep, dark unconsciousness of human mind. Okay? Id is the instinctive part of human mind, but there is a constant control over the instinctive self, and that control is imposed by id, right? So it is the consciousness that we all carry all the time. Okay, so when we are sitting in a social gathering, we are able to control our id. So it is our wild behavior. We control it, and we control it with the help of ego. So ego is our real projection in the social life, right? When we are in community, when we are outside meeting with real people. So we hide our id with the help of that ego that we carry all the time. On the other hand, superego is our ideal self. That is we try to become in our civilized life, right? It's kind of our, heroic self, our best, that we cannot really attain in real life, but that is what we want to be, a very good human being, extraordinarily powerful human being, or whatever we dream to be. Okay, so that is our superego. So we all human beings are kind of in constant struggle between id and superego. Okay, so we never totally can become our superego. We cannot totally become our id even. Why? Because we are always, in the expression of our ego. That is the real self we carry in our society, right? So that was his general pattern of human mind and human behavior. Anyways, now those
Um,
dreams that he recorded in all his books. So those dreams were, kind of stories. Okay, they were kind of stories. I'm trying to give you this indication that just the way Sigmund Freud interpreted those dreams, and then he was able to point out various, meanings out of those dreams, exactly in the same way. We can treat the literary text, novel or a short story, or a poem, or a drama. We can treat all of them as dreams, conceived by who? By the creative writer who wrote that particular book. Okay, or we can, and therefore we can analyze that particular book or novel just the same way as we would analyze as Freud's writer. Okay? So my voice probably is breaking. Somebody saying that. Shazib and Abir, do you have any questions? You are ready.
yes, sir. Could you please explain the difference between it and superego?
Okay. And Shazib?
No,
Shazib,
sir.
does
No,
you
sir,
have
I
raised?
don't have any question.
You don't have?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, so if we make a kind of a kind of visual picture of that, uh, so it is, we can make a graph of it, like a perpendicular line. So it is our consciousness, our unconscious self, right? While ego is the real self we project in life, but superego is our idealized self. Okay, a self that uh, we idealize to become, but we probably can never become in our real life, right? So in it in it we reside uh, the, uh, our instincts, our wild instincts, our animalistic instincts. Okay. um, so some people would compare it with Satan. Okay. Um, just because this is an example known to us all, I'm using that example. So some people would compare it with Satan. Okay, you know what Satan is, right? Satan is pure evil, right?
Yes, sir.
While some people would compare superego with divine. Okay, you know what is divine? Divine is pure good,
Yes, sir.
right? So human being can never be Satan, can neither be Satan nor they be divine, right? So it's not possible for a human being to, totally get rid of all the goodness and become pure evil. Only Satan can be that person, that individual or that. Similarly, uh, superego is that kind of divine self. That's can we cannot attain that kind of pure goodness. But they, that id factor is always there, underlying our personalities. It is always there, right? But it cannot totally become, you know, parent in our personalities. So whatever little act of evil that we commit, that act of evil comes from it. So lying or cheating or um, uh, committing robbery or any kind of evil that we commit, that comes from there, right? But then superego is pure goodness, right? That is something we try to achieve in our life, but we cannot totally achieve that. Still, whatever desire for goodness we all have, right? We all have desire for being good. Whatever that comes from that idealized self, which we can never attain in our real life. Now ego is something in between both of them. It kind of maintains a balance between pure unconsciousness and pure id and pure divinity, or between id and superego. So ego is a kind of bridge, or it is a kind of balancing between both of them. Okay? That is what we carry with us in real life. you know that is what keeps our instincts under control, right? So we try to act civilized as a civilized person. We try to control our bad instincts. That happens because of the role that ego plays. So ego is a kind of controlling wall, you know, over our instincts or over our id, right? And it helps us to stay good, okay, when we are in society. So it is a very simplified understanding of what is id and what is superego and what is ego. Do you have more questions?
No, sir. Thank you for explaining it.
Okay, so now just one thing, additional thing that I want to say, and then that will be the end of the lessons. So basically, when when Sigmund Freud interpreted those dreams, uh, he was essentially saying that when we are in sleeping, when we are in sleep or when we are sleeping, uh, the ego, that we are able to hold on in our waking hours, that ego is not functional as such in our dreams. And that is where our id gets a total expression or total freedom, or our unconsciousness gets total freedom, right? And we are able to see that while we are sleeping. So he had this distinction of unconsciousness and consciousness, right? So kind of consciousness sleeps when we are sleeping, but the unconscious part of mind wakes up. And that unconscious part of our mind, that kind of gives us visions, which we call dreams. Because during waking hours, we kept that unconsciousness under control. Therefore, it is kind of suppressed during the waking hours. But when we sleep, that pressure from it is lifted, and the unconsciousness gets total expression. And that appears as dreams. So when we wake up, we remember a lot of it. Sometimes we don't remember any of it, but in most of the cases, we do remember most of it. Now, he uses a few terms in order to further explain how dreams work. So two terms for the time being. One is that he calls displacement. Okay? And the other one that he calls condensation. Let me put them here. Displacement and condensation. One more term, which comes a little before these two terms, is called dream content. I put these terms in the chat box, please have a look. So basically, this is how he explained dreams. He said that whatever we see in the dream, that is dream content. In other words, the story of the dream. You want to tell somebody what you saw in the dream, whatever you will tell is called dream content. Okay, that's kind of the raw material of the dream, okay, without explaining it in any way. Now, his view was that this is how dreams work in our, sleeping hours. They work through condensation or they work through displacement. Okay. Now, what is condensation? By condensation, he meant that sometimes the experiences of months and years, they are condensed into a very brief dream of a few hours, and sometimes a dream of a few minutes. Now, when we wake up, we feel as if we have been through a lifetime of many years when we were in that dream. So that is kind of first way how dreams work. That is, dreams condense the time into a small episode, and we are able to think about those years of life through a very short dream. The other way dreams work, the other way how dreams work is called displacement. So displacement is this, that we have a dream in which we see something which has nothing to do with the real life, which seems impossible in many cases, but still we have that dream. One dream that he would refer to in his book, Interpretation of Dream, that is the dream of flying in the air. A person, an individual has this dream that person or individual is flying in the air, right? You cannot fly in the air in the real life. So this seems to be a stupid dream, right? Doesn't make any sense. But Freud would say that it will be a mistake to consider this kind of dream as a mistake. Why? Because he would say that this is an example of a displacement in dream. That is, the unconsciousness has its own mechanism by which it it puts the meaning of a particular experience into an object. And in our dream, we just see that object, right? Or a dream has a mechanism by which it puts our experiences into another kind of experience. Okay, and we see just that experience in our dream. So for example, somebody might see in one's dream a house built on water. That will be an example of displacement. That is, the experiences of that particular person have been translated into that one object, a house on water. Okay, or as I already gave this example of flying in the air. So somebody might repeatedly see that that person is flying in the air, right? In that case, certain unconscious experiences have been translated into this act of flying in the air. So both are examples of displacement. Now, to conclude my discussion, so people who do psychoanalysis or the people who do psychoanalytical criticism, they believe that displacement and condensation, they are examples of symbols and metaphors. So condensation could be a metaphor, while displacement could be a symbol. So the psychoanalytical critic, they argue that what we know as metaphors in a novel or in a poem, they are just like condensation in dreams. That is, a very big experience is reduced to a small experience or a small phenomenon or a short phenomenon. Similarly, what we know as symbols in various literary works, they work in exactly the same manner as displacement works in a literary text. So there is a small object and all experience is kind of reduced to that small object. But that small object stands for something else. That is not the real intention of the dream, to show us a house on water. Rather, it becomes a symbol of something else. So basically, when we are reading a literary text, we can treat that text as an extended dream and look for the examples of condensation and displacement in the book. We can analyze that, and when we do that, we do psychoanalytical criticism. So this is the end of discussion. If you have any questions, you can ask.